Hello, everyone. We are on day 2 of our masterclass. Day 2 is all about sophomore year. How can you help your child navigate sophomore year and have it be effective in the goals they're working towards, those career and college goals? And I like to start at the beginning with the reality is that we as parents only want 3 things for our kids. And we need to keep our focus on those 3 things as we go through this process. And sometimes it's challenging, but with the end in mind, it works out. So, what is that end in mind? With those 3 things, we want our children to be happy. Now, they're not going to be happy every minute of every day, and that should not be our goal. But we want them to ultimately be happy in the career path they've chosen, in the college experience they end up having. We want them to, they're going to work a long time. We want them to be happy with what they're doing, feel like they're making a contribution, that they're utilizing their skills, that they're making an impact, whatever it looks like for them. We want them to be happy. The second thing we want for our kids is that we want them to be self supporting. We want them to be able to have the lifestyle they'd like to have. We want them to be responsible for themselves, be able to have a family if that's what they'd like to do, be able to travel if that's what they'd like to do. So we want to make sure that their career path not only brings them happiness, but also can allow them to support themselves. And then finally, when we're talking about what else they need from us, we want them to feel supported. We want them to know that we're there in it with them, that we want the best for them, and that we're not trying to dictate what we see for them. As parents, we do see the future. We do see, like, oh my gosh, I know you could do this. This would be so great. While you feel like you're helping, often it feels like pressure to students. And I hear this from them. And so I'm sharing. Because, when they're teenagers, they don't always share in the best way for you to, understand what they're trying to say. So, with the end in mind of them being happy, self-supporting and feeling supported, I've got some tips for you for sophomore year. One of the big things we want to avoid is that sophomore slump. We want to make sure that they're on track, they have a plan, they know their starting point now as a sophomore. What's sophomore slump? Sophomore slump is when your child has done really well freshman year, and each teacher individually is going, oh, you did so great in my class. You should take the honors version for next year or the AP version. And next thing you know, you've got a child who has 4 or 5 honors or AP versions of classes. And now it's too much. It's an overwhelm with their extracurriculars, things that they have to do. And all of a sudden, the grades start to go down. So it's really important that we know where we're at. How did we end up freshman year? What is that cumulative GPA? What do we need to do sophomore year? Are we hitting that sophomore slump? As we're hitting midterms, is it getting more challenging? Do we have students complaining that they don't understand? They're not getting a good grade. We're seeing A's fall to B's. You need to get some tutoring. You need to get some help. And children are really resistant to tutoring. It has a very negative connotation to them that, oh, it must mean I'm dumb. I'm not dumb. It's just the teacher doesn't teach and it's hard and everyone has a B. When you're going to college, you're competing against a lot of kids who don't have a B. They had a different teacher. They did get tutoring. So you have to consider, what are the long range goals? And that's what we want your children to start thinking about. What do they want that to look like for themselves? Because if they realize what they want and they know what it's going to take to get there, they're more willing to put the work in now, even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when it feels like, oh gosh, why would I need tutoring? I don't need that kind of help. Maybe they do, because it's very common for students, like I said, to fall into that sophomore slump because they were good students, but it's just too much all at once. And that's okay. So I want you to, as parents, I want you to take a look at their report card from the end of freshman year. Couple things. Are there 8th grade classes on there with a GPA? What is their cumulative GPA? That's your starting point for right now. And so how do we ensure that GPA is going upwards and not falling backwards. Colleges, GPA is the number one thing they look at, and I'll give you some helpful resources regarding GPA in just a minute. So when we're thinking about your GPA and how classes count and what you should be looking to do, all schools want rigor. They want to know that your child took advantage of difficult classes. I had a girl in here a couple of years ago. She was a senior. She was working on applications. That's when she came to me. And she told me what her dream school was. And her GPA was right on the border for the dream school. And I said, have you taken any AP classes, advanced placement classes? Well, no, I'm taking them this year. I haven't taken them yet. I'm taking them this year. My counselor told me that was fine. Well, unfortunately, the college she wanted to attend wanted to see AP classes before you apply to college. They want to know how you did. They want to know, are you capable of college level work already? How did you do on the AP exam? Is college going to be a real struggle for you, or are you going to be successful? Your past success best determines your future success. So colleges are looking at all of this and evaluating it. So it's important that you sit down with your child. They're going to be picking next year's classes already in January or February. Most kids bring home a form the day before class selection is due, and they say to their parents, here, can you sign this? You need to get a little bit more involved, have the discussions. It's great that their teachers have recommended certain things, but you as their parent need to discuss their goals. And are those recommendations going to get them to their goals? And again, the more selective the school, 50% or less selectivity, 60% or less, they better have some APs and honors in the mix. IBs are also options for that. But definitely when you're planning junior year classes, it's a great idea to have some APs. That doesn't mean we need to go AP crazy and take AP everything. I prefer that students stretch themselves in the area in which they expect to pursue. If your child's definitely a STEM kid, then an AP bio, an AP physics, an AP pre-calc. If your child is more humanities, then maybe an AP language, AP government, AP psychology. And it can be a mix, but think about where their strengths are. Think about where their interests are. Because if they hate history, even if they're good at it, they're not going to do well in AP Gov. It's a lot more reading. And if they hate the subject, they're not going to do it. So you really have to start to think about it and balance what you're doing to make sure they're going to earn A's if possible, especially if they're looking at selective schools. And let me preface, all of our students do not go to highly selective schools. A lot of our students go to state schools. But even state schools, especially the flagship school for each state, for instance, here, Ohio State University, they're expecting AP classes. They're expecting a little bit more. We also have students, though, that go to technical schools, that go to trade schools, that go to pilot school instead of a traditional four-year university. So again, beginning with the end in mind, what does your child want to do is really important so that you can best navigate this. It's not one size fits all. I'm not saying that everybody should be taking AP classes. What I'm saying is, if you're thinking about a more selective school or the flagship school in your state, it's definitely warranted to take AP classes to increase your child's chances of getting in. When we look at what does that four-year path look like, kind of plan it out with your child. If you're taking certain classes this year, what's the next step? Most schools, if you go to their website and you go to the guidance office, the guidance tab, they'll have program of studies or course selection, something like that labeled, so that you can look at what do they look at as that four-year path based on the classes that you're already taking. 12th grade only counts for really highly selective schools that will want mid-year class grades. Only most colleges are going to make selections prior to that first semester of senior year being completed. So they're going to make selections without regard to those grades. So if your child is saying, well, senior year, I'll be able to bring it up, it's not going to matter. Now, senior year matters in the fact that you can't slack. You can't suddenly have senioritis and all your grades go down. But it's not going to help you get into a school. It's not going to be that last little oomph that's going to push your grades up. For really selective schools, they often do want first semester grades from senior year to make sure that they're on par with everything else that you've been doing. That's more, if they're not on par, it's going to weed you out. Then if they are on par, it gives you the go ahead. So, just something to consider, that those classes are not going to be nearly as important to the admission result. So don't let your child think they are. The third thing we need to talk about, so we've talked about planning now, avoiding the sophomore slump. We've talked about class selections, how you want to start to consider that. Have those conversations sooner rather than later, because that's coming up. We want to talk about the skills your child needs to develop. And I cannot stress enough how important time management is. And it's almost funny sometimes. Students will come in and they'll tell me, oh, I didn't have time to do, my homework. I didn't have time to get this done. I've been really busy. And I have one response back to them. And I want you to ask your children this today and tell them they're not allowed to do the math. Just tell you they have to come up with the answer like that. How many hours are in a week? How many hours are in a week? It's 168. Most students have no idea. And it's funny to me because if, let's say, they're celebrating Christmas and they get a gift card, and the gift card doesn't have a receipt with it. It doesn't have a dollar amount on it. Your kid is going to be like, well, Mom, can you call Aunt Betty and see what she put on this? Because I don't want to walk up to the register and not know. Or how do I find out how much is on it? Because you want to know how much you have to spend before you take a $150 item up to the cash register, only to find out the card only has $25 on it. And most students recognize that. Like, oh, I'd want to know how much I have to spend first. And yet they never think about how many hours do they have to spend. So when we talk about time management, we have an outstanding planner we've been using for years, highly successful for both high achieving students and, even better, helping students who have struggled really get on track. The planner uses a time blocking system with somewhat unique directions to really appeal to students. So we encourage students to develop their time management skills by using a planner. Time blocking, I feel, is the best way to do that because they can really get a better feel for how they're spending their time, how they want to spend their time, because we want them to control that planner. I often tell students, if your mom's been on your back every weekend, she's saying, did you study for math? That math grade's not very good. Did you study for math yet? When are you going to study for math? And it's frustrating to you. Use the planner. Oh, well, Mom, I had 9 to 10 here Saturday morning and 3 to 4 on Sunday. That's when I'm doing my math. I'm going to study twice this weekend. So that when you're laying on the couch, catching up on Netflix from 1 to 4 on Saturday, your mom is like, oh, okay, I'll let it go because you have a plan. So for students, it's often like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I can do that. So we really highly encourage the planners. Let's talk about some other skills. If your child's not utilizing these skills in class, it can be a difference maker. It can bump up a full grade. I've seen it happen with a lot of students. So one of the things we notice is students aren't really good note takers. They take notes in pencil. Their entire page is all gray and white from the pencil on the white paper. And they think to study, what they're going to do is read through those notes. And as they recall, oh, I remember this, they think that memory is the same as being able to recall it tomorrow on the test. And it's not. I recall writing this. Will I be able to pull it out tomorrow from that memory bank? Probably not. So when taking notes, we find something that's super helpful. And most of our college students actually go off to college with this information and use it. And I cannot tell you the number of students who hadn't used this before and use it now. And they're like, oh my gosh, game changer. Use colored pens, colored pencils, write in color. Your brain, over 80% of everything you read every day is in black and white or some shade of black, gray, and so forth, like from a pencil. Your brain is not taking the time to remember everything because it doesn't stand out. It's not going to catalog all of the information you read in a day in black and white and memorize it. But if you write in color and you use different colors, let's say you're doing anatomy and all the bones are blue and all the cartilage is green and all the blood vessels are another color and so forth. On the test, you might say, oh gosh, I can't remember what this is. You know what? I remember I wrote it in blue. It must be a bone. Oh, this is a bone. I'll choose this answer. It makes life so much easier. Also, I find that students pay attention more if they are writing in color. It's more attention grabbing. It's not boring. It gives them a chance to grab a different color and start to use it. So we really want students to take advantage of little tips that make a big difference, especially when you start stacking them on top of each other. One of the other things is note cards. Note cards from like way back in the day. Quizlet is not the same as a note card. A physical note card, you either know what's on the back or you don't. You don't get Quizlet to give you the answer and then go, oh yeah, I remember that. And then it just goes away. With a note card, the ones that you don't know what's on the back right away go into a pile to be gone through again. Note cards are best used at night right before bed, right before a sports practice, because sleeping and sports, your brain focuses in a different area. And the part of your brain that would be focused on learning that information is going to continue to try to work on that because it's not distracted by new learning. So those are two great times. Any type of exercise or sleep, doing it right before that. Your brain will continue to try to work on it because of the other part of your brain has taken over for those other things. So using note cards is also super helpful. Another thing is if your child, especially if they've hit that sophomore slump, you want to find a space in your house where they can do their homework. When they're in their brain is like, oh, I can sleep, I can lay down, I can relax, I can scroll social media. Maybe I have a TV or a game station in here. Those are the things I normally do in here. Your brain is not focused on studying. I have seen students who have documented their time when they've struggled to figure out where their time's going, who in an hour of studying only have spent 15 minutes in studying. Oh, my nail polish is chipped. I gotta go get my nail polish. Oh, I can read while I'm doing my nail polish. Oh, so and so texted me. Oh my gosh. And it goes on and on and on, and you're derailed. If you study in the kitchen, as soon as you walk in the kitchen, think about it yourself. You walk in the kitchen and immediately start thinking, oh, what are we having for dinner? What do I still need to buy at the grocery store? Let me open the refrigerator. What's in the pantry? I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? Well, your child's brain is going through all of those things. They come in the kitchen. What's for dinner? What do we have to snack on? And so forth. They're not focused on studying. If you have a formal dining room you use twice a year, that's a great place. Your kid has been there so infrequently, their brain has no preconceived notion of what's happening there. So that might be a good option. Or if you have someplace else, you can carve out a little space that your child has not used for something else. That's a great opportunity to have their own homework space. We created a whole book on study skills. If you're interested in that, let me know. But we talk about methods like chunking, primacy, recency, mnemonics, acronyms, a whole system of things, because everything doesn't work for everyone. So finding what works best for you in your wheelhouse is super important to help them keep those grades elevated so they have more opportunities. I'm not telling you your kid needs to get straight A's. I'm not telling you you need to put that pressure on your child if they're not an A student. What I'm telling you is if they have A's, they have more opportunities available and colleges to pick from. So it depends what they want. Maybe that's not important and that's fine, but they should still learn how to study. Learning how to learn is an important element for the future, no matter who you are. Um, everybody uses Google Maps now, but if a satellite goes out or your phone dies or something like that, you need to be able to figure things out. So learning how to learn is important. That's what they're going to school for, to learn how to learn. Not necessarily some of the subject matter, but more how to do the process. So it's important. We talk a lot about writing skills in sophomore year. Really important to develop those writing skills. We find that a great technique, and this is if you're following study skills, is C under number 3. 3 was develop your skills, time management, note taking, study skills. Under study skills, D is writing skills. We want to develop those writing skills. We use mind mapping. Mind mapping is where you're basically going to brain dump everything. Instead of the old fashioned, listing out like, oh, what am I going to write first? What might I say about it? What's the second thing I'm going to say about it? Okay, now what am I going to say second? What's my main point? Instead of having that type of outline that's super restrictive, where again, I've still got to figure out what's first. Mind mapping is where you get to brain dump it all. We like to write a big circle on the page. We start drawing lines off of it like the sunshine. What could I say about this topic? We'll write it down. What could I say? What else could I say? What else could I say? Oh, this kind of goes with this. I'll make a little star line off of that. All of a sudden, you've got this whole circle of ideas. Now you go through the circle of ideas. What would I talk about first out of all of these ideas? Put a number 1 next to it. What's second? What's third? All of a sudden, you've developed a whole outline. Typically, when students mind map, we're talking 5-6 minutes. Done. Now they know what they're going to say. That makes the process so much easier, and it increases the cohesiveness of their essay. It's not, oh, I should talk about this. And now I'm going to talk about this. Oh, I should have said this up here. I'll just add it. And it's not cohesive. So learning how to mind map first, take that 5 or 6 minutes, makes the entire rest of the essay allow you to write it much easier, but also allow better consistency and flow throughout the essay. Reading skills. Why do we stop teaching reading in 3rd grade? I don't understand. The complexity of what students are reading in high school has elevated so much, and yet we have not given them new tools but that they can use to really comprehend that more intense, passages, the more intense books and so forth that they're going to read. We haven't really taught them the skills to analyze while they're reading. And so it's kind of important to circle back. A lot of students struggle with timing on standardized tests for the reading sections. They struggle with comprehension. I see this across the board. Really good students still struggling with those areas. So helping your child with reading, encouraging more reading. Most students today don't read enough. It's hard to become really good at something that you're not doing. So the more you can get them to read, finding things that they like, not the 15 seconds on TikTok, that doesn't count as reading, or on X, Twitter. Those are things that you really want to do to help elevate your child's grades. And those are things we help students do if you feel you need more help. Number 4, have your kid try new things. They need to build their resume. They're applying to school, in 2 years, less than 2 years. They need to really increase that resume. So how do you do that? The more they try, figure out what they like, what they don't like. That can also help them on their career path. If they volunteer someplace, maybe they volunteer in a medical facility and they realize they hate it. That can help them on that career path. Have them expand their interests. Really encourage conversations instead of, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? What do you want to do? What would be interesting? I like for students to start thinking about what can they do to help someone? Who do they see that needs help? And then start talking about it through that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. think outside the box for opportunities as well. There's a couple of great programs. Number 5 is think outside the box. There's a couple of great programs that you should take a look at. If your child's a poor writer, if they're a poor reader, these are things that can definitely be addressed through edX, EDX. That's a website, EDX, or Coursera. Coursera is the word course with RA after it, Coursera. It is another website. Both of those websites host free classes offered by the elite colleges. So if you want to take a college comp class, no charge, 0, and no grades. You just take it so that you get the experience. But they also have things like graphic design, photography, baking. They have a lot of different things. So depending on what your child's interested in, and here's the thing, because there's no cost and there's no grades, your child can start taking something and go, oh my gosh, I hate this. It's super boring. I'm not getting anything out of it. Great, stop. Nobody cares. It's fine. But at least try. At least try something. The other thing you can consider between sophomore and junior year are college summer programs, especially, again, if you're looking at elite schools. Wake Forest, for example, has numerous immersive programs, 1 to 2 weeks long on the campus. They get the feel for that, but they get to pick the area in which they'd like to study. And so it's really eye-opening to students. I had a student who did a program at Wake Forest. He thought Wake Forest might be at the top of his list. And once he did the program, he realized Wake Forest wasn't his vibe. It was a little too stuffy for him, too academic, perhaps for him, what he wanted. So, which was great for him to learn that over the summer instead of ending up in college there and hating it. So summer programs are often very helpful for that. Number 6, get to know your teachers. Don't just hand in homework. Encourage your children to talk to their teachers. Tell the teacher what they liked. What did they learn that they liked? What did the teacher teach that they were like, oh, wow, this is really worthwhile. This is really interesting. What did they struggle with? Have that conversation with the teacher. Those teachers are going to be instrumental if your child's applying to National Honor Society their junior year, because they're going to need teacher letter of recommendations. They also are going to need to have letters of recommendation for college. So very, very important that they start developing relationships. What you don't want to have happen is for teachers to write, your kid was a pleasure to have in class. Colleges are like, this is worthless. This kid did nothing, didn't make an impression. They don't want to hear that your kid's a pleasure to have in class. That's just basic. So make sure they're developing relationships. They should definitely ask for help if they need help. A lot of times, really good teachers will have extra office hours. Really important that you start discussing colleges with your children. And I really want to caution you. We had over 150 seniors in here this year working on applications. And I can't tell you, it had to be at least a third of them. If I don't get into XYZ school, my parents are going to be so disappointed. Remember, all we want is for them to be happy. Really selective schools with a 5% acceptance rate, your child should know in advance, there's no tears if you don't get in. I don't expect that you're going to get in because of how difficult it is. It's like a lottery. It's like spinning a wheel. It is not based on what you've done. It's based on what they're looking for at this moment. So tell me, what kind of school would you like to go to? What does it look like? Are there a lot of trees? Is it really urban? A lot of big buildings? Do you have to walk very far across campus? Is everything close together? Start figuring that out. Take some time to visit a couple schools. You don't need to do formalized visits as a sophomore. If you can, that's great. But what's even more important is just getting your kid on campuses so they can start to articulate what they like and what they don't like. They often don't realize how different it is. Because in high school, they have friends at other high schools. All those kids are still taking biology. All those kids are still taking algebra 2. All of those kids are still taking English. They're taking all the same classes. So your child kind of has a perspective that everything is the same, regardless of where you go. And they need to understand that's not the case. So the more they see, the more distinct differences, then they can start to talk about what they really want. Um, Ask about, would they like to do study abroad? Do they want Greek life? What kind of clubs would they like to participate in? They're going to be in class only 15 hours a week. Right now, they're in class probably close to 35. What are they going to do with all their free time? What would they like to do with all their free time? It's funny how diverse the offerings are in clubs and organizations on campus. University of Tampa has a skydiving club. I mention that all the time because to me that is so incredibly unique. But it just shows that if your kid's really interested in something, no matter how unique it is, you can probably find it at a school. So really important to get them talking. It's important to talk about careers too. So many kids can only name 12 careers. They don't even know what those people really do. I had a student in recently. We started talking about what his wants are in a career. One of the things he talked about was, I don't want to sit behind a desk. I mentioned sales. He said, salespeople sit behind a desk or they're in retail. I don't want to do either one of those. And I got on the phone with a gentleman I know who's in medical sales, and he described his day. And the kid was like, oh, I didn't know that existed. Yeah, because why would he? And that's the point. Kids tell you what they want to do based on such limited information. And we need to broaden that information so they can really start understanding. We love to set up shadows for kids. Best time to do this between sophomore and junior year or during junior year. They've got to start narrowing their options during that sophomore year, really start thinking about it so you can set up the best shadows for them. Discuss the college budget. A lot of times parents will say at the beginning of the process, I want my child to go to the best school. It should be the best school for them, not the best in someone else's mind. What is the best school for them? Okay, how much is it going to cost? Because there is absolutely no reason for someone to be $300,000 in debt to teach early childhood education. So you really need to consider, what's the return on investment? What's the budget? And the best place to understand how much a college will cost you. Each college, if you go to their little search bar up at the top, has what's called the net price calculator. That net price calculator will give you put in all your information, your child's grades, all of that. It's going to tell you what college. That is so much value right there, because that way you can determine, are we in the right place? Are we prepared for this? Do we need to adjust what we're looking at? And parents, it's okay. If you don't want to spend $300,000, your child's not going to get less education. Your child's going to get the amount of education they put into the program. So if the perfect school for them is a community college, a trade school, and it doesn't cost $300,000, that doesn't mean they're not going to come out and make good money, be self-supporting, and be satisfied with what they're doing. So it's really important that you start having those conversations early. Too often, parents encourage their children to apply to really selective schools and then find out those really selective schools aren't giving them anything. And it will be $300,000. And they're like, ooh, we really can't afford it. And now you've got, in a very short amount of time, you have to adjust that expectation. If you start now, sophomore year, with what that expectation looks like, you're going to be that much further ahead down the road. So I definitely encourage that. Sophomore year is also the time where you really need to start looking at test prep. And you might be thinking, wait, have they had enough math in school? Yes, they have. Test prep is important sophomore year because most kids don't hit it out of the park first try. Most kids are stunned by the timing constraints. by the fact that they have a 4.0 and they didn't score well that first time, because standardized tests require different skills and strategies than what they use in high school. So by starting early in sophomore year, where your child's still feeling like, it's a ways off, this doesn't really matter, it's okay, is less stressful for your kid. For them to get a score and go, oh, wow, I expected my score to be a lot better than this. It's really low in this area. That gives them an opportunity to go, okay, this is what I have to work on. Now I have an entire year to work on this based on my schedule. Gosh, I play football in the fall. I'm not really going to have time to work on it. I don't play a sport in the winter. Maybe I'll work on it then, because I play baseball in the spring, so I'm not going to have time. So being able to plan for themselves, pick the best time for themselves, not feel rushed, not feel forced, super important. So start working on that test prep during sophomore year. Every sophomore should have taken an ACT or an SAT, not a pre, taken the actual ACT or SAT before the end of sophomore year, by June of sophomore year. The SAT is usually the first weekend in June. The ACT is the second. You can take both. Every college accepts both if they accept any. So, and no colleges have preferences. Years ago, there were preferences. They don't care anymore. And one of the bigger things that I definitely want to talk about is initiative. It's great to join clubs in school, and I don't want to discourage that. It's great to get a job. It's great to be on a team. But those really selective colleges are looking for initiative. What did you start? And I'm not talking 501c3. I'm talking, where did you see a need? Who did you see needed help? And so you did something about it. I have a kid who 2 hours a week volunteers. He goes to the senior center in his community, and he teaches old people how to use their phones. How do they FaceTime their grandkids? How do they connect their watch to their phone? How do they get emails on their phone? He teaches them that because he saw a need. I had a girl who saw too many notebooks, binders, books, and so forth going into landfills every year at the end of the school year. She thought, wow, some of these things are barely used. We could donate them. So she not only had her school set up boxes when it was locker cleanout days to donate partially used items still in good repair, but also I connected her with 9 other kids at 9 other schools so that they could do it at their school. And they collected enough to supply numerous 3rd grade classes in the inner city with school supplies. Low maintenance, low time commitment, super huge impact. So encouraging initiative. What does your kids see? Where do they see a need? What could they do to help solve that problem, to help meet that need? And parents, it's time. It's time for them to start doing laundry. You know how embarrassed you'd feel if you walked into a room full of peers, your adults, and everyone knew how to do something and you didn't. Let me tell you, I know from lots of kids that how they've made fun of kids who didn't know how to use the laundry in college. Make sure your kids know how to do laundry. Also, start them budgeting. They need to know how to budget so that you don't end up with the $2,000 1-month credit card bill because they thought, oh, it's unlimited, and they could just start buying whatever they wanted. Make sure that they understand how credit cards work, how that budget works. Now's a great time while they're still like under your roof where you really have a lot more control. Because once they're off on the college campus and they've used that card a ton of times, you may not see it until you get that statement, and then it might be too late. So make sure that you're teaching them about budgeting and reinforcing that now. And I know, you have so many other things to do. It's like, oh, I'll get to it. But laundry and budgeting are 2 of the biggest things kids lack when they get to college that are stressful for them. Because once you cut them off that credit card because they overspent, that's stressful. When they walk into that laundry and they have no idea how to do it and everybody else does, while to you and I, it might seem simple, well, you just ask somebody. No, they're in panic mode because they feel like they're the only one who doesn't know how to do it. So teach them how to use the laundry. So hopefully this is helpful for what you should do for your sophomore. Tomorrow we're going to talk about juniors. Yesterday we did freshmen. If you need additional information, down below I'm going to drop the link. You can schedule a call with me, and I'm happy to send you the other videos if you missed yesterday or you'd like to be invited to tomorrow's video. And I hope that you have a great, successful sophomore year. Start looking at those classes. That's coming up really quickly, and I will talk to you soon.